Hey, we're Summer and Candace. This is the Connected Life Book Club. This is our final podcast for season 3.
Wow.
Which honestly, it feels like it's flown by, doesn't it?
Totally.
It's a 6-week study that we've done, and now this is our kind of wrap up, our overall thoughts of the book, and just a little bit more long form where you can just hang out with us, grab a cup, grab something warm and delicious or bubbly or fruity or whatever you like, because, well, we have delicious drinks. Summer, what's in your cup?
Well, I cannot enjoy it quite yet because it is still way too piping hot. But it is. I took a break from the normal. It is not a salted cream, cold foam, cold brew, light ice, hold to caramel. It is a decaf French vanilla tea with one little packet of Good Earth sweetener.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Is Good Earth like stevia?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Stevia.
Nice.
What is in your cup, Candace?
I have regular K-cup coffee.
Yeah.
No, it's good though. It's just one of those things. It's so funny. When I first drink it, it's like the best thing that I've ever tasted.
Mm-mm.
And then when I get to the bottom of the cup, I'm like, oh, I'm kind of done with that now.
Well, I saw this one meme. It was like one of those things going around Facebook. And it showed all the different kinds of coffee you could drink and what it said about your personality. And when it got to K-cups, it's like, who hurt you?
Oh, no.
Send help, send Starbucks.
Okay,
Thanks.
I will say I wish that I had a cortado. That's my fancy drink when I go out and order a drink at a fancy coffee shop. It's equal parts espresso and milk. So it's kind of like a mini latte, but it's a lot more concentrated. And so that is what I wish I had in my cup.
I learned that I am a complete and utter hipster because to save money, I started making my own cold brew at home.
Sure.
And we have it year round, and we have like this big dispenser in our fridge that's usually filled with coffee, but I'm really trying to cut back. So here it is with my decaf French vanilla tea with one packet of Good Earth sweetener.
There you go.
All right. So Shades of Light. Candace, this is a book that we've heard a lot about. No, we've been really grateful. So many of you guys have reached out to us with all the books that we've studied since launching this, saying that this book was what you needed when you needed it. But I feel like this book specifically, we have heard so much, just so many of you saying like, this was for me. This was a book that helped me when I needed it right now. I related to this. I related to that. So Candace, what was a moment for you stepping back from this book, looking at it big picture, that really stuck out to you?
I mean, there are so many moments, and I think even for each character, there were different moments where I related. But I think more than anything, and this is kind of a bummer, something that I've been kind of addressing in my own life, is the way that Jamie feels. Jamie's the mom. The way that she feels when Wren is in one of her deepest, darkest places, and she's like, I don't know what to do. I just don't know how to help. I don't know what to say. I am saying all these things and trying to be perky and maybe help turn this around. And Wren can't even hear any of it. She's just like blocking out the world. And I relate more to Jamie in that moment because I tend to be the person that's like, I don't have the right words for this situation, like kind of uncomfortable when people are struggling. And I need to be less awkward in those moments. But yeah, that was something that stuck out to me in a big way, as there are ways to have helpful conversations, but you got to try really hard and even kind of educate yourself in how to best be in those moments with someone that's suffering.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you carry it like Jamie does?
I think it would depend on the person. If it were my child, yeah, I could absolutely see that. When I have friends that are struggling, when I have friends that are suffering with depression, anxiety, I can almost be a little bit like Jamie when Wren goes for a walk and gets lost and is a little like, how could you do that? How could you only be thinking of yourself?
Yeah.
Right. And things like that, which I know is not the right answer. And of course I would never say that. But in my mind, it's a little bit like, where is your brain right now? But that's exactly it. That's the whole point. And that's been like a really nice eye-opening thing to actually really feel Wren's struggle because, that is heavy. So what about you? What's the moment that stuck out?
I would say it's actually a really small moment, but it was eye-opening, I guess. So it was when Wren was debating about texting Casey and just that whole inner monologue where she's justifying reaching out when she knows that she shouldn't, and like continuing really what is a toxic relationship and just really kind of making all the excuses for why it's okay. Oh man, there's very few things I couldn't justify if I really wanted to do something. I'm real good at that. But I was in that place, man. That was totally me at a lot of those relationships. And reading it, you have that outsider's perspective and you see like, girl, just put it down, walk away. Put it down, walk away. But being in that situation, I felt like I connected more with Wren when it came to her interactions with Casey than I connected with her at any other point in the book. But yeah, just the Casey interactions were the hardest. And of course, I mean, getting the news that Casey had died. Like that was a moment that you could have, I don't know if anyone was watching me read that, like on the airplane. I was reading it on a plane when I got to that part. I'm sure like my mouth was open, my eyes were big. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, no, Casey's interaction with Wren, I think, is what stuck out to me.
So then the next question, the next idea that we're going to dive into is, did anything specifically challenge your perspective?
So Wren's relationship with Casey helped me to reflect on my own bad habits when it comes to codependency with people who I feel like I need to save. Okay. So I struggle with that sometimes. I think seeing the world through Wren's perspective helped me to appreciate, sounds weird, that is real life. Like that people do struggle to that level. Like I have people in my life who they're just like, I just shut down. I just can't face this right now. I just can't do this. And therefore, like, I'm not paying my bills. I'm not cleaning my house. I'm not showering. I'm not doing anything like this. And you just want to like shake them like, just come on, you're ruining your life because of the way that it affects some others of us. But just to see like, no, that's real. Like, and I think that Sharon wrote in such a way that even if you are not the Wren in the story personally, you can really understand where she's coming from.
Yeah.
So I think that was just understanding that perspective more as a helper gave me more sympathy, knowing what it's really like to be in that place.
Right. Totally. I think for me, as far as my perspective, I was really inspired by Kit, by the way that she was unfailing, unwavering. She put her own frustrations and, things on the back burner to really be there 100% for Wren. I mean, even as far as giving her a job, giving her a place to live, feeding her, meeting those physical needs, but then also being there to just grow with her in those spiritual moments that were really helpful for Wren. And I felt a lot of inspiration by Kit as just like a map of what to do and how to help somebody that is struggling with depression. I will say, after reading some of Wren's story, after reading some of the moments where she was feeling really down, where she couldn't function, I think maybe I've had some depression episodes before, and I never put a name on it. I never sought help even. It was just, I live on the couch now and I don't want to do anything. And even if I, am shutting off the TV or shutting off the audiobook or just sitting in silence, it's just this crushing, overwhelming, like, despair.
No, yeah.
Which is like, and it's not an all the time thing for me. And I know that I've struggled with anxiety, but to understand that, more of like an overall, what is the purpose of everything? That's what kind of gets me down sometimes, because it's like, well, I should go work out. Well, I should do my laundry. Well, I should do this. And it's like, why? So that I can work out again tomorrow, so that I can, fail at doing basic things that most people can do, and then getting really down on myself in those ways. And so I think, the perspective of what it's like to be depressed was kind of eye-opening.
And I think that I could agree with that. I used to struggle a lot more than I do now. And I used to go through seasons like that, never as bad as Wren, never to that level. But there has been plenty of times where I can't face it. It's just overwhelming. And so things that need to get done don't get done. And I think it's a good reminder that you don't have to be in that place on a clinical level but we all find ourselves in that place sometimes. And I think it was really eye-opening to me seeing how those well-meaning people come around and do that whole, you just need to pray more, you just need to have more faith, and realize, like, have I ever done that? Have I done that to people? Because I know where that comes from. It comes from a good place. But seeing the world through Wren's perspective, you could see how that's just the opposite of hopeful. And I think recognizing through this book the work that the church does need to do in that regard, I think it was a really, perspective challenging thing about the book. Yeah.
So speaking of the perspective, because I liked that about the book, where it was a different perspective every chapter, sometimes flipping within the chapter, was there a character that you saw yourself in the most? And maybe how did that open up some ideas of who you are?
So I would say Summer, a dozen years ago, would have been the Wren, specifically, partly with the depression, but specifically in her relationship with Casey and that codependency thing. Now I would say I'm definitely the Jamie, and not just because I'm a mom now, but because of how I interact with the Wrens in my life, like feeling that need to be there to help, to save, and feeling overwhelmed and really frustrated sometimes. Just feeling that responsibility and weakness and guilt and all of that. I feel like I definitely saw myself most in Jamie. But I would say my favorite character, I'd love to grow up and be like Kit.
For sure.
Which I think we're all supposed to feel, when we read the book. I think Kit's supposed to be our favorite.
She's the Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right.
Just has all the right answers.
Well, and she's been there, and she's a good example of looking at the struggles in your life and using them for good and letting them shape you the way that they're meant to shape you in a way that serves the kingdom. And so I think, I really liked Kit. What about you?
I think most of the time, on a regular basis, I see myself most in Mara, who's like, she's just kind of the doer, She's working at the homeless shelter. She's, doing these retreats and diving into things with Kit, but just kind of like overall happy-go-lucky, like wants to help people, but seemingly in more like physically tangible ways. And I feel that a lot, like, let me bring you soup, let me wrap you up in a blanket, let me like rub your back, but I'm not so good with the talking and the sharing, but I'll be there for you.
Well, and I think she had a nice perspective because she was someone I kind of perceived was a little bit more of an outsider. So she had the ability to just kind of come in at those right moments and be a ray of sunshine, but she didn't have to carry it like everyone else in the story did. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say that I probably related most to her.
Who would you say is your favorite character in the story?
It's got to be Kit, right? I loved that Kit was a little bit challenging to everyone in really good, loving, genuine ways. I think that's cool. The way that she was able to swoop in and be there for Wren, but also challenge her to grow, challenge her with the painting the, different stations of the cross, and how she challenged Jamie to like stick to boundaries, and she challenged those in her life to just grow. It was really, really good, challenging moments. And so I really liked Kit because of those.
Was there anyone you didn't like?
Well, Casey's parents. Ugh. Okay. But also, now that I'm thinking about it, I think he lied a lot about his parents. But then the way they treated Wren afterwards, when Wren was the one that called them and was like, hey, where's Casey? And they totally shut her out without any sort of, it's because of her that they got the information that Casey was even in town, that they should even be looking for him, that he might be lost. His wife, whose name, Brooke.
Okay, I was thinking that.
I know, right? Like, Brooke never reached out. Brooke didn't ask around. Her husband had been gone for how long? And I don't know. I get it because maybe they had a big fight. Maybe there was a blow up or whatever. But still, his parents were my least favorite.
Yeah, they were kind of the worst. And it's like, I didn't really like Brooke either, but that's also partly, it's like, okay, well, a lot of it was Casey lying about her. And I knew that from the beginning. I didn't like Casey. Casey was my least favorite.
Oh yeah, as soon as he showed up, his sass and selfishness and just
gross, cringy.
And nothing felt like the way Wren described him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the chapters leading up, I'm like, come on, Casey, just text her back, say something to like give her encouragement. And I'm like, oh no, go away.
Yeah.
You're making everything so much worse.
I think Casey just brings up a lot of ghosts from my past. And so that's why it's like when she was texting him, like, don't do it. This is not good. Because I knew where that story was going.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I just didn't like him at all. But one thing that I think this book did for so many people is it brought up questions, probably on purpose, and it shook people up. So I've been meeting with my book club, and one of the things I asked this last weekend is, if you could talk with the author, what questions would you have?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know if Candace, you've been thinking about this at all. If we could get Sharon on the phone, like what would you ask her?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be good to know where the inspiration for the book comes from, why this is such an important topic to her. I just think that would be really interesting.
You know what? And that's what everybody said. That was the one question that everybody had. So I do have her phone number.
Nice.
Because the publisher was really generous with that. So I say we give her a call.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right. Well.
Hello.
Hey, is this Sharon?
This is Sharon. This is Summer.
This is Summer and Candace.
Hi.
Yay. Hey, Candace. Thanks so much for making this work.
Thank you so much for taking our call.
Of course.
So Sharon, one of the things that we do every time we start one of these long form podcasts is we talk about what's in our cup. And so Candace and I have already talked about that. So what are you drinking? What's in your cup?
Oh, it's always a cup of English breakfast tea. PG Tips is my favorite, but it has to have milk. I can't stomach the black tea by itself. A little
like
bit of a
milk?
whip.
Milk or cream?
No, it has to be milk, like a 1% milk. Yeah.
Oh.
And the eternal debate is, do you put the milk in first or afterwards? But I just kind of stir it all together in my mug.
You stir it all together so it steeps in the milky water?
Well, no, I steep the tea first, and then
okay.
I add the little bit of milk and then stir it.
Well, how very British of you.
Well, we lived in the UK for 5 years, and so this is a tradition that my son and I started together back when he was about 12. So he's 24 now and still comes home like once a week to have tea with Mom. So that's the most
Stop.
thing.
That is the cutest thing I've ever heard.
Oh, I
Isn't
love
that great?
that.
I know.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. Now I really need to go get some more tea. I've been trying to be on a tea kick, cutting back caffeine consumption, but
well, English breakfast tea is not going to help you with that one.
It's not like black coffee.
Right.
It's like a quarter of the amount. I did my research.
Yeah. Good.
Oh, well, perfect. Okay, so I've got to tell you, reading this book, we have gotten so many responses from our book club members here that this book has been just a life changer for them. And so many positive responses of people who are both relating to this issue as a Wren, and so many people who are more in Jamie's shoes, who are learning better ways of interacting with the Wrens in their life. And it was just so eye-opening. And so, Sharon, I think the biggest question we have for you is why? Why this topic? Why this book? What is your relationship to this struggle?
It's deeply personal. And our son David, the one I mentioned, 24, he's given permission for me to share a bit of his story. So he has struggled with depression and anxiety in very significant ways for a number of years. And so though Wren is not our David and I am not Jamie, I know Jamie's terror. I have felt her helplessness. I have prayed her prayers. I have cried her tears, longing for Jesus to rescue and deliver my son from his affliction. So it really emerged out of that personal struggle. Beyond that is my passion for the church, that as the body of Christ, we can do a more compassionate work in terms of being alongside people who are struggling with the issue. And it is so epidemic now. we need to be contributing our voice to the conversation and being offering good care to those who are suffering. So the reason I wrote the book, I wanted to encourage those who are like Wren, who are suffering and struggling. I wanted to poke at the theology of if you just had more faith, if you just read more scripture, if you just trusted Jesus, you should be well. And I wanted to give voice to Jamie's struggles as well. So kind of a multi-pronged desire for the book.
Well, and I think that was accomplished. I think that's why so many people relate to all the different characters. It's actually kind of interesting what you're saying about the relationship with the church and wanting the church to do better. Do you have personal experience that has caused you to, has been contributing to these stories, or is it just things that you've heard from other people?
Well, I served as a pastor for many years, and so I was always upset when I was alongside someone who said, well, I've heard that if I just had more faith, if I just memorized more scripture, kind of the pat answers that just further exacerbate the suffering and add to the stigma and the shame and the loneliness. And so it was a personal passion that was stirred then, that heart around the issue. Just to try to encourage and offer a different way. I mean, that the vision of the book is that Jesus is the one who keeps us company in our sorrows, in our suffering. And what does it mean to know him as the man of sorrows acquainted with grief? And Jamie's question in the book is core. If the Lord does not remove the cup of affliction from us, whatever that affliction is, then how does he keep us company while we drink it?
Mm-hmm. So would you say, Sharon, that you align yourself most with Jamie having a child who struggles, or would you be more of Hannah being someone who's offered pastoral care to people in this position, or are you equally both?
I sit in both places. I've been alongside as a Hannah, as a pastor. I've been alongside conversations as a spiritual director, so I've got some kit in me with regard to that, what it means to companion people who are suffering. And yes, I've got Jamie in me as well. Again, that sense of helplessness, begging the Lord to intervene, and yet not sure what God's ultimate plan is going to be. Will he remove the cup, or will he enable us to drink it?
So I think it's such an important topic, but I can imagine that the writing process, the sitting down to actually be in the story and be living that while you're writing it, can be kind of overwhelming. I mean, I even felt at times in reading the book like this is kind of too much for me to bear right now and kind of take on in as I'm reading it. So did you feel a struggle as you were writing it to be in that place all the time?
Actually, the story came so quickly. I prayed about it for probably a year and a half before I started writing. And then once I started writing, it came quickly. And I remember saying to the Lord, I expected it to be so much harder to write this book. And I just sensed the Lord say, Sharon, the living of it is what was hard. And you've done that. You're doing that. And it is, I'm so glad that you mentioned it's a hard book. And I'm hearing from readers who identify with Wren who are saying, you know what, her story is so real. It's so close to mine. I can't bear her details right now, so I can't finish the book. But I'm recommending it to everyone I know so that other people can understand what it feels like, because she's giving voice to my experience.
You know what, speaking of that, I wanted to share with you something that one of our readers had sent to us. And so we launched this book club, announced the book that we were studying on a Monday. By Wednesday, I had the following email. And though our book club is really angled toward women, it was a man who sent me this email. So, and he asked if I would share it with you. And so his name is John. And he says, I want to thank you for recommending the book Shades of Light. As a veteran, I suffer from PTSD, depression, and anxiety, and I could really relate to Wren. But what I found really interesting was Jamie and Kit. Through them, I could see for the first time how my mental health affects my wife. Always trying to figure out how much she can tell me, therefore carrying much more of the load than she should. My prayer for your book club is that this book and your ministry will open the eyes to the body of Christ, that the church will see that mental health is not a sin issue. I found that the church is not always a safe place. Being told if I had faith, God can heal me, or I just need to grow up, or the best one is I just need to grow elephant skin and don't let things bother me. Hopefully the church will start to understand that we are all in a spiritual war, and in war no one goes without scars, pain, and loss. And then he goes on a bit more, but he just could not stop thanking us for recommending and thanking you for writing this story, and it really changed his life, Sharon.
Oh, I am so deeply touched by that, and so thank you to John for being willing to share part of his story. That he just captured that. This is the reason why I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
If it's just for one who says, I feel seen, I feel heard, I feel known, or it's opened my eyes or enlarged my compassion, it's given me a new vision of Jesus, that's amen. That's it. That's the heart of it right there.
So Sharon, as people are walking away from this book, like they've just wrapped it up, so many people are really kind of deeply affected, what would be kind of a parting thought that you would want to send them away with?
Well, the story goes forward, and so actually the sequel is releasing in January, on January 7, and so Wren is moving forward, trying to find her equilibrium, and the new book, Remember Me, focuses on Kit's story as Kit is writing letters to Wren about her own experience, how she has been shaped by suffering. And so just as an encouragement, I want your listeners to just be open to the possibility, to all the ways that Jesus comes alongside of us. He doesn't judge us for our sorrow. He doesn't condemn us. He doesn't try to talk us out of it, but he companions us with in it. And this is, we're coming into the Advent Christmas season. What we're celebrating here is God with us in flesh and blood and all that means. And so may all of your listeners know the incarnational presence of the one who spared himself from nothing that we encounter in this life, and so keeps us company in all of it.
That is really sweet. That's so nice to know that there's a second book. We actually hadn't done that follow-up yet. And I think there's a lot of people that are kind of wondering what happens next, especially with the climax of the book. And that actually begs a question that I've been kind of mulling over, and we've even talked about, is in Casey passing, was it suicide? Was it an accident? I mean, obviously it's kind of left up to interpretation, but it was just one of those questions that just hangs over your head a little bit.
It does hang, and that's part of Wren's grief, is the unanswered questions.
Yeah.
And so I was really deliberate about that, because no matter where we sit, there are issues in our lives that we're just never going to have answers to. And for Wren, that just, it makes her grief, she can't find that closure that she thinks she needs. And that is one of the things that Catherine will kind of walk her through in the sequel, Remember Me. But it also mirrors the ambiguity around Vincent van Gogh's death. And that was also kind of a deliberate connection, a parallel track, if you will, with Wren's story there.
So did you have a lot of experience?
I didn't give you an answer, did I?
Oh, no, that's okay.
That's what we expected.
Yeah, no, it's probably the best answer. Now, did you have a lot of experience with Vincent van Gogh before writing this book? Like the amount of detail and history that goes into that piece of things, I was wondering if you were a fangirl yourself.
I am a new fangirl. So I actually gave Wren part of my story back in 2016. I was visiting a museum in Kansas City. I saw a painting of his on exhibit. It was a painting of the olive groves, and I was so deeply moved. I didn't know if I was going to cry or if I needed to take off my shoes and worship. I had something from the painting just so deeply spoke to me, and I didn't understand it. So when I got back to my hotel room, I did a little research, discovered that he was painting a series of olive trees while he was in the asylum, while he was meditating on the Garden of Gethsemane, and that caught my attention because I didn't know his story. I didn't realize he had been a person of faith. And so I began to research, and did months and months of research, and fell in love with him as person and his art in general. So I have very much become a fangirl like Wren.
That's awesome.
Thank you so much, Sharon, for sharing your heart with us. Thank you for chatting, making the time to talk with us today. And thank you, I would say, first and foremost, for writing this book. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's been a delight. Thank you for choosing it and moving it forward with your listeners. I'm so deeply grateful to you both.
Well, thank you so much. That was awesome to hear from Sharon, to hear her perspective. I mean, I think that's always so interesting because even though it is a book of fiction, it's based in truth and it's based in some parts of her life that she was able to speak into.
Yeah, I love that opportunity we have sometimes to talk to the authors because I think it really does give us an insight beyond with the book. But I got to say, like, I don't know, it helped me appreciate it more. So,
sure.
Okay, so all right. So here's the big question. Here's what it comes down to. Did you like it?
I think overall, I liked the story. So yes is my answer,
but
with a question mark.
Okay. Explain the question mark.
I didn't like reading it. You know, like I was feeling sad the whole time I read it. And I mean, I've been open about that in the podcasts leading up to this big one, is that I call it the bummer book because literally I'd be like, oh, that's right, I have to read those chapters today. And it sounds bad because it genuinely was a good story. And it even opened some really cool spiritual aspects that like I really hadn't thought of. She did a good job of exhausting these like tumultuous moments in the story to the exact point that I could handle. Because it was like I would get to the end of a chapter and be like, I can't do more of this. I can't do more of like everything's sad and the world is going to end and mom is upset and like I just couldn't. And then it would shift into something else and it would change and grow a little bit into maybe Jamie's perspective or Kit's, great advice coming in to help out. And so she did a really good job of that because I got to a few points where I was fatigued while reading. So overall, yes, I'm glad I know the story. While I was reading it, it was a lot. It was a lot for me.
Yeah.
What do you think? Did you like it?
I did like it. I think that it's really interesting when we were chatting with her because, you have these questions and you kind of have an idea of what their answer is going to be before you ask it. And so when you had asked, was it hard for her to write? I was thoroughly expecting her to say, oh, yeah. And she's like, no, it came pretty easy because it wasn't easy to read. It was
well, and that's
heavy.
The interesting thing. I mean, when you think about how we felt while we're reading through Wren's story, while we're reading through Jamie's perspective, and to know that Sharon has even a taste of that in her real life, I'm sure it was kind of cathartic to just get it all out, to create this story where she could be in charge of the dialogue and what people are thinking, because in real life, when you don't know, you can't peek into somebody's brain. It probably was almost, a therapeutic thing to do.
That's a really interesting thought because it's something she was in control of. It's a story about lacking control from every character's perspective, ultimately not being in control. And yet for Sharon, she had ultimate control of like what came out. So for me, I actually really liked the book. It was a super bummer book, and I feel that. But I think anytime I was tempted to be like, what the heck? This book is so sad. It just reminded me, like, no, there's people right now, this is their life. There's a lot of people that this is their life. And so it was kind of an honor to step into that and journey with them in this way. And I also really appreciated the writing because it wasn't flowery. It was nothing crazy. And yet it was so good at getting you into the shoes of every character.
Yeah.
Because you might, like we talked about from John, he's a Wren, but he had no idea what Jamie and Kit went through, and maybe we're more Jamies, but it's really helpful to understand people who are in Wren's shoes. And I think she did such a good job of playing those perspectives that I really didn't know who she was in the story. And that was really refreshing. And I think I would recommend it to people. I think it's a great resource.
I already have recommended it to people where I'm like, oh, this is what you're struggling with. You have to read this book. And so it's been really helpful to be able Because she paints the picture so well of even as Jamie is doing certain things, her intent behind it, And so if you're in a relationship like that where you're somebody that's struggling with depression and people are coming into your life and saying certain things or doing certain things, to even have a little explanation that's like, well, I know this comes from a good place, can be so helpful.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited that she has a follow-up to that.
Yeah,
I mean,
I had no idea.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it'll be really interesting to see how Kit guides and helps grow Wren that much more.
Yeah, I think that was the thing we had talked about. It's like, where's the story going? And it wasn't tied with a bow. And I kind of thought was on purpose. So I'm excited to hear that we're going to hear more of that story. Well, we hope that you enjoyed the book as well. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of our discussions, not only today, but for the last 6 weeks. And if you haven't finished the book yet, sorry for any spoilers, but these podcasts for this book and for all books we've studied in the past, they're always available to you. So thank you for just being a part of this community. And we will see you soon when we announce our next study coming up.
Season 4.
Season 4.
Season 4. It's like ghostly.